Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 2024 Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. My name is Christina Rodriguez Unalt, your panel moderator for our Famous Faces Draw Off panel. Before we begin, please read our anti-harassment policy that's in the chat box. And don't forget to subscribe to the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival's YouTube channel. If you're in a classroom, a school, a librarian, or an educator joining us, our school visit fund is back. So you can enter to win a free visit from a Latinx author or illustrator for your classroom or library. And you can find that link to the entry form in the box. So for our exciting draw-off panel today, I have with me Nomar Perez, Ellia Ana Hill, and Edel Rodriguez. So we're going to take turns introducing ourselves for our Famous Faces book that we're all going to be sharing today. But since this is a draw-off panel, we're going to be drawing while we also answer these questions. And so for our very first prompt, I would like everyone to draw themselves as an alebrije. So for our listeners who are not familiar what an alebrije is, it is a Mexican folk art tradition, such as the one on my necklace, that is usually made up of a lot of different animals with very exciting colors and patterns. And I thought this would be really exciting for us to start. So I'll start while everybody can start drawing, and I'll introduce myself. So again, I'm Christina. Hello. I am from Toms River, New Jersey, and I am an illustrator. So my most recent book that came out is Pedro and the Monster Eaters, which was published by Arte Publico Press back in May. And this is really exciting because it is about Pedro Linares, who was the creator of alebrijes, which is why this is our first drawing prompt. So as an illustrator, I actually did go for a BFA and an MFA at University of Hartford. I now teach a BFA program at Montclair State University in New Jersey, and I've illustrated 4 traditional books now. So as an illustrator, I love to work in all kinds of mediums. I do digital, I'll sometimes do paintings, I'll do color pencils, and I love teaching the next generation of students coming up about the ever-changing evolution of illustration and just kind of get them all set up to be either children's book artists or comic illustrators. Some of them want to do a visual development and character design, and it's really fun. Sometimes I feel like I'm cheating because I don't even feel like I'm working because I love my job so much. So yeah, how about Nomar? Would you like to go next? Just unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. So I'm a children's book illustrator. I've been illustrating for quite a while. I was able to also write my own story called Cookie in the City, which I was able to illustrate as well too. I'm also an art director for American Greetings as well, but I began there as a greeting card artist. So I've been illustrating for quite a while, and while I was there, and then I dived into books after that too. And now I do both. I'm an art director, and I also illustrate books on the side, which have been very rewarding, especially to be able to do my own stories and talk about and showcase my culture as well too. So it's been great.
Great, thank you. Ellia, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name is Ellia Ana Hill, and I've done several children's books. I've wrote and illustrated a couple, and I've also illustrated a few. This is the one for today, the Lucy and Desi. This one is Medias Naranjas through Little Libros. I wrote and illustrated another one called The No Boy, which is about one of my kids. All my illustrations are done in cut paper. So this drawing is a little bit different because normally I go from the drawing to doing the cut paper. I've been doing art, cut paper for gallery shows and like freelance for over 20 years while juggling family. I got 6 kids. I always tell everybody that. So I've been doing artwork mostly part-time, and in the past couple of years I've been finally able to do the children's books. So I think I have 5 on the shelves right now.
Great. And Edel. Why don't you go?
Hi, my name is Edel Rodriguez. I've been an illustrator for about 30 years. My new book is called The Mango Tree, and it's based on my life. It's a bit of um, a kind of an adventure story where I start off with the tree that I shared with my best friend when we were kids in this very small island called Cuba, and from there it moves on uh, to further adventures, on this little kind of treehouse place, and then eventually moves on to something more complex, which is when I left the island on a boat, and eventually landed in the United States, which I depict in the book in in this very unique way here. So I mostly work using acrylic paint, rollers, oil-based ink, and I create my illustrations that way. I also use something called Sumi ink, which is something here. Currently, I'm using just a basic Sharpie for this drawing. And I've also done this other book called Worm, which is a graphic novel, and it's much bigger. It's about 300 fully illustrated pages. But this book has a lot of information. It's more for an older reader, so I wanted to create a similar story for younger readers, and that's how I came up with this one called The Mango Tree.
Hey, thank you. I see everyone has these amazing alebrijes. Great. Okay, so for our next question, it seems like everyone already talked a little bit about their process, which is great. And it seems like we're all doing a lot of different things. So why don't we talk about what our favorite art supplies or techniques for, and how do you prepare when creating a book based on a real person? How might that process differ a little bit? Ellia, why don't you go first?
Okay. Could you say the question one more time?
Yeah. So one, what is your favorite art supply to work for? And how might your technique change a little bit when you have to research or prepare on working on a book about a real person?
Well, obviously my favorite supply is paper. I try to go with some vintage paper if it's more of an older, maybe an older icon, an older famous person, like an old, like a vintage color palette. I guess it would be more the color palette style. That would change, but otherwise, oh boy, I'm kind of stuck there. Otherwise, I think my technique overall just stays about the same. I mean, my style is pretty universal around like all my books.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to start out with.
Okay. Nomar, how about you go next?
So I tend to be more of a digital artist. I mainly draw on a Cintiq, which is a drawing pad that's digital, pretty much. Mostly digital using Photoshop, and then a lot of times I do get the opportunity to go ahead and draw on paper, and I tend to use whatever is available, whether it's acrylic, whether it's markers, whether it's watercolor, anything, just to kind of get my point across. And then to prepare for a lot of the books, which I've done two little golden books, one on Lionel Messi, and the other one on Sonia Sotomayor. To prepare for those is just pretty much doing a lot of research on them. Some of them I already knew kind of a little bit of their background, but you just got to dig deep into their background, where they came from, look at a lot of images, of course, to get the likeness of the person, and just to understand the process. And one big thing that I was able to resonate on both stories is that they both had a physical challenge that they needed to kind of like overcome. Lionel Messi, which pretty much he had like he wasn't able to grow as fast and develop, so he had to overcome that. And then Sonia Sotomayor, at the age of 7, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which is something that I could relate because I have a daughter too that was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as well. So those connections really helped to kind of form the book and help me to illustrate them.
Great, thank you. And Edel, how about you?
I really like to paint a lot. So if you look in my studio back there, there's a bunch of paintings in the walls there. So I like to work on large paintings, maybe 30 by 40, 40 by 60. And for that, I tend to use acrylic paints on canvas. I like, the free form of paint and sort of letting it do its thing and seeing what happens. And I also enjoy printmaking. So a lot of mono printing, woodblock techniques that, where you can make 2 or 3 prints at a time. It's great to play with. And how do I sort of develop a book that is about a well-known figure? I did one on Jimi Hendrix about 3 or 4 years ago. And the main thing when you're doing a book about a known figure, I did another one on Sonia Sotomayor too, is to have as much research as possible. I think what happens with kids when they look at books, they're like, wow, how did you draw Jimi Hendrix? It looks just like him. Like you can just magically draw someone you've never seen. And there's a lot of photo research, researching the guitars he played. We are illustrators, about 50% of the time. The other 50% is research and reading and going to the library to get more and more information. So it's again, for me, when I was a kid, I'd see an artist and or a book, and I thought, oh wow, they just drew that out of their head. And what I like to teach children is so that they get more comfortable with it, is that you do the research first, then you do your sketches, which are kind of a mess and kind of rough, and then eventually you figure out a way to bring all of that into the final. And I think it's not taught enough, and I think we're somehow kind of introduced or people think that we're magicians, and we're not magicians. I really do feel that a lot of people can do what we do. It just takes patience, time, and understanding that you're not a magician. You are. It's all a process.
Yep.
Yeah, agreed. So I can piggyback right on that and say, well, first, my favorite art supply. So I'll talk a little bit about my process already, but I am similar. I start with ideas first. So sometimes even to get the ideas out of my head and before I can even start drawing, I'll jot down words that I think of when I first read the story. And sometimes then I come up with metaphors or things like that I can think of that might make the story a little bit more interesting. And I also think about, when doing a children's book, is what I can bring to the story as an illustrator. So sometimes we call this a part or B story. So maybe there's a character that's in the illustration that isn't in the story. And I always try to do something like that to bring something else onto the table when I'm doing a book. So first I do, sometimes words after I read the story. Then I'll do these really quick chicken scratch thumbnails that nobody can understand what they are except for me. And then I refine them when I start to realize what I really want to do for each page. And then after that, then I start doing a lot of research. So for my book for Pedro the Monster Eaters, I had watched a documentary on Pedro Lionel. I tried to find as much info I could about his family. There were some illustrations where his family were in, even if they weren't in the story, the text, I still had to illustrate them. So I wanted to make sure that I got the time period right, where he lived, what the scene might have looked like, what his house might have looked like, what his workshop looked like. And something that was really fun that I added to the story was eating this little rooster in the documentary. So I thought, oh, this is great. So he has a pet rooster in the illustrations that's never mentioned in the story, but you can find him on almost every page. And some of my favorite art supplies while I'm doing that is once I get to the final is I'll start painting. And I love painting in acrylic paint. So I actually will draw on my iPad first. And here's like a refined sketch on Procreate. So I have my tablet and I have kids too. So it's easy for me to draw on the couch or we're all watching a movie and I still feel like I'm still hanging out with my family, but I'm also still working. And then I'll print it out on printer with my printer at home on a nice big piece of watercolor paper that's nice and thick. And from there, then I will start painting right on top of my sketch with acrylic paints. And then probably my favorite part, and this is where my favorite art supply comes in, is adding color pencils. So I have the nice big box of color pencils because at that point, I feel like the painting's almost finished. I'm just making everything look better. I'm adding texture. I'm making everything feel more vibrant. And even then I have to scan it in because I work traditionally because I have to send it off to the publisher as a digital file. And sometimes I have to nitpick and fix things on the computer to make it perfect. So there is quite a long process, which I think everybody can agree to, that it does require a lot of research. It's not just coming up with something in your head and then coming to the final painting. There's a lot of steps that happen in between and many hours are spent. And if you just keep going at it and keep trying, then you'll get there. You know, not every illustration is a masterpiece, but you have to get through the bad ones to get to the good ones. Great. So it looks like everyone's almost done with their alebrije. Does anyone want to talk about what they drew?
Well, I liked your answer. How you explained it. Like, oh, that's how you answer it.
Ellia, what did you draw there?
Well, I didn't draw myself as the animal. I drew myself as wearing the outfit of it. So she's got the dress, and then she's got me, and then the kind of like a headdress of it. So that's as if I would dress up as a alebrije.
Love it. Edel, what did you draw there?
Well, I'm just a cat. My art supplies. If I were ever an animal, I would be a cat, just sleeping all day, pretty much.
I love that.
Occasionally getting up to eat, and maybe drawing something. So that's it.
Oh, and no more.
Just pretty much just drew myself with a lot of patterns and things like that, just to kind of get that inspiration. It was fun.
Great. So I drew my portrait and then combined a lot of different animals. I was kind of thinking like eagle, which I think is my spirit animal, and wings so I could fly. And then of course I have to have my paint set because I'm also figure out a way to paint even if I was in alebrije. We do have a comment or a question from the audience. So how difficult is it to draw those likenesses without copying research, especially when some of the pictures are pretty iconic? So Edel, why don't you start with that question?
How to draw a likeness? I think it just comes with time. What I do is I get maybe 4 or 5 photographs and I kind of lay them out in front of me, and I just start looking at it the same way I would draw someone in real life. You know, the thing what you do have in real life is you have different angles, so you can kind of move and get a sense of the person. You don't get that when you're just looking at photographs at a photograph. But if you do have 3 or 4 photographs, you can kind of construct a likeness by taking, say, like an eye from one and looking, you know, trying to get better understanding of what the person looks like. So that's how I handle it.
Great. Nomar?
The same way too. I try to find as much images of the person. I mean, obviously, Lionel Messi, there's tons of images of him, and as well as Sotomayor, and just try to, I don't know, soak it in as much as possible. Try to look at the likeness, and then from there just start sketching, because I mean, you don't want to copy a photograph. You try to get inspired by that, and then you just start sketching until you finally find that groove, I guess, from all the sketches you've done, and then you start picking and choosing and kind of like organizing them in such a way that you start kind of seeing that person in an illustration come alive.
Yeah, great. Ellia?
Well, I'm a little bit different because my stuff is already so stylistic.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually start with my usual big head and body, and then I kind of work backwards. With Lucy, she was so distinct with her big poofy front and then the curly hair. So I think it's really easy for me to have my artwork not look like a photograph, that I actually have to work to make sure that it actually looks like the real person and not like the rest of my artwork. So like, oh, I lost my earbuds because I'm not used to wearing these. So I do look at the photographs like the guys, like all you guys do, but I just try to like keep it more in the eyeballs a little bit lower. And I think I also did the Diego and Frida. So I've been drawing those characters. I've drawn Frida for a while. I've drawn Lucy because she's been one of my favorite characters ever since I was a kid. So I've been drawing them for a while. So I was already comfortable with them. So now it's just a matter of doing the research on their clothes and doing the research maybe a little bit so they don't look like kids. I don't know if I answered the question, but I think I had to just make sure that my characters don't look like they were looking like Boss Baby and looking like little 5-year-olds walking around with makeup. And so yeah.
One thing I've also found that is I spend some time watching videos like on YouTube of that person, so you get a sense of how they move, you know, their gestures. A lot of times when you look at photographs, it's something that was posed by a photographer, and it doesn't quite capture their attitude or gestures. So looking at videos, pausing them, doing screenshots gives you more research for those portraits.
Yeah, I agree with that. With Lionel Messi, I looked at a lot of video of him obviously playing, and one thing about him is that he kicks with his left. So that's something that I needed to see him do so I could get that, get inspired by that when I sketch.
Yeah.
That's great. Something I do that's a little different is that, you know, after studying all these photographs of the person that you're going to draw, is to put that away.
Yes.
And try to remember what those pieces were so that you're not copying from the photograph. You've kind of had this mental image now of this person. And what I like to do is I make character sheets. So sometimes I'll draw the first one that comes to my head, but I'm like, what happens if I make the nose a little bit bigger, the head a little bit bigger, space the eyes apart, and I'll try it again, and I'll try it again. And I'll have this whole mess of character studies. And then when I commit to one, then I do an extra study where it's just that one character where I try to do all the different poses and try to see them from different angles, different expressions. And that's a way that I do just to prepare for myself when working on a 32-page picture book, because consistency is a big thing. You have to make sure the character does look the same throughout.
And it helps a lot when that person has character, you know, hair, beard, glasses, whatever. If you just go like, if a plain looking person, you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do here?
Yeah.
So I think this leads us into the perfect next drawing prompt, which let's choose one of our main characters and let's draw them. So while we're doing that, I have another question for everyone, which is a bit of a fun one. So when did you find out you wanted to be an illustrator? And when did you publishing? So what made you decide that you wanted to do children's books specifically? Adele, would you like to start?
When did I want what?
Yeah, when did you realize you wanted to be an illustrator?
When did I find out I wanted to be an illustrator? So, you know, I was doing illustration, but not really knowing it was illustration in high school. I was already doing posters for, you know, festivals down in Miami, like the Hispanic Heritage Festival, Carnival Miami, and submitting them to competitions and actually winning. But I didn't realize, I thought it was art. I didn't really know what it was. And then when I went to college, is when I learned, it was in Brooklyn in New York City at Pratt Institute. I took what were called illustration classes. And then I really got a sense of what illustration was, which is art for communicating something, art for books, art for magazines. And once I got out of college, I took my portfolio around and I got a lot of really great feedback from the New York Times and New Yorker and other magazines, and immediately started getting work from these places. So it was more, you know, from people looking at my work and sensing that I had what it took to be an illustrator. Then I just pursued that as a career, and I've been doing it now for about 30 years.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Nomar, would you like to go next?
What was the question again?
How did you realize you wanted to get into illustration and specifically children's book publishing?
So I've always since back in high school, I've always wanted to go into art, and even when I was living in Puerto Rico. But not, it wasn't until I moved here when I was 10, and I still remember going to the library a lot and kind of finding books about art. But I've never knew what was the kind of like the path to kind of get to that. So I looked at a lot of books, a lot of drawing books, a lot of illustration books, and that inspired me to after I graduated to kind of go into that field. And from there, I when I went into college, I went into more of a drafting, computer and aided design. And but I've always like I should go into and do this, and I was always inspired by a lot of the illustrators at that time. And so then I made the switch in community college to switch to taking art classes, and that was kind of like what set the path to later go into university and go to art school. And at the same time, I was not only doing art, but I was also learning computer animation at that time as well too. So that was a big influence as well as with that. And then from there, after I graduated, I got the opportunity to work for American Greetings as an illustrator, and I've been there for 21 years as an illustrator, and then switching to art director this past year as well. So it's been very rewarding.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Ellia, how about you? When did you decide you wanted to be an illustrator and work in children's publishing?
Well, since I was 5 years old, honestly, I wanted to write and illustrate books. Right when I saw that you could do series of books like the Clifford the Big Red Dog. So that influenced me right away. I actually wanted to get into greeting cards. That was my big thing when I was, yes, yeah, that was my big dream. But I also wanted to get into children's books. I went for children's book classes. I majored in illustration and minored in creative writing. That's where I met my now husband in a children's book class. So I always went for that. I started doing cut paper in college. And that was just it. I just wanted to go for the books, but it was just kind of a long process because I decided, he went along with, that we were going to start having kids because freelance was a tough gig with both people being illustrators. So I did a lot of freelance in between. I did a few like portraits. I did a whole lot of stuff in between. I did stuff for a lot of digital stuff. And then it wasn't until like after I had my sixth kid when I finally landed the children's books, and I was really happy about that. So a little late start for me, but the dream finally came true.
That's great. So I have a similar story. I always knew I wanted to be an artist. I just didn't really know what illustration was at the time, but I think the first validation I had that I was kind of good at this sort of thing was actually in first grade. So I had this art teacher, and he made us do this little scratchboard assignment where we did all these little shapes out of crayons, and then we painted over them in ink. And then we used, if I remember, I feel like it was the back of like a pin or something, and we scratched, the ink away so that we could see the crayons come from underneath. So I just did this firework picture. I thought, okay, it's colors, it's a black sky. I didn't know anything better, but then the teacher told my mom that it was actually really good. She's putting us into like this statewide competition that I won third place at. So it's the first time I ever won anything. And then from then on, I always wanted to do art. I always did extra art classes. I did art club in high school, took outside art classes. I actually wanted to go and, go to art school. So I didn't know anything about illustration until I started taking illustration classes. And it was because of my dear mentor, a man named Dennis Solon. who taught the children's book class and taught us, showed us his watercolor techniques and used to bring in his books as he was working on them. So we got to see his sketches, hold them. It made it seem obtainable. So, once he taught us how to make a book, I knew right then that, like, that's what I want to do. I love storytelling. I love fairy tales and folk tales and trying to make characters. And I knew that that was for me. So right after college, that is exactly what I wanted to do. Though I didn't start right away there. I ended up working as a scenic painter for a while and at a place in Union City in New Jersey. And I used to paint these big, large sculptures that would end up being for mini golf courses. But what that did was it taught me how to paint texture. It taught me how to paint murals on large scales. So eventually I did get my first children's book job and, a couple of jobs in magazines for children. And then it just kind of blossomed from there, and then part of the reason why I want to teach now is because my mentor was such a big part of why I do what I want to do, is that I want to do that now for other people. Right. So we have a couple comments here. So we want, Ines wants to know, how does your scanned work end up looking so clear as digital art, as a final print in a book, when it started out as a print? So I guess how does that change from the process? So, if you have a painting, is there anything you have to do special to make it look the way it does when it's printed? So, Edel, do you want to start that question?
How does your art look so clear?
So when it's printed.
Well, it takes at times various sort of, like, you work with a company, the printing company, and the art directors, and they generally do the scanning. They color correct. They do a lot of things that improve the quality of the print. So that's one part of it. Another part of it is I tend to do lately in a lot of my books. Most of the drawing is done in ink, right here, and I would scan the black part of it, and then I do a lot of the coloring in Photoshop digitally, so that you once you have a color and it's a very clear color, you set up a digital palette, and you just keep going back to that color when you reuse it throughout. And what happens is on every page that color doesn't change. It sort of keeps that the color intensity. So I've been doing that, and I think that's helped a lot of the books have more of a cleaner, crisper graphic feel, which is what I like to do. It's almost like like when you do silk screening, you want just that one color to be a very clear, flat color. If I were to scan that silk screen, then it sort of loses a little bit of that punch. So I've moved that part of it, the color part of it, to digital. So I work back and forth between printmaking, mono printing, the black line work, and the black shapes, and also using inks and sumi inks, mostly black, and then the color, doing it digitally, but adding a lot of the texture. Like if you look in here, a lot of the texture that I get from my printmaking processes, I bring that to the color parts as well.
That's wonderful. So I think you answered that question perfectly for all of us.
Okay.
In your book, my next question was going to be, what is your favorite illustration from that book that you just shared with us?
Oh, mine is this one here. Let me see. I think here. It's sort of a view from inside the jungle. So it's a bit abstract at first, but then you get to see all these animals, birds, snakes, and then the characters are actually all the way over here on top of the tree there. So what I liked about it is that you don't really see them at first, but then if you zoom into the picture, you get that the characters are there. And it was just the kind of image. It took me, I don't know, probably like a week to figure out because it's so complex. But once I was finished, I was like, I did it. Wow. And that's why I keep going back to that one as my favorite one.
That's great. Nomar, do you have a favorite illustration from your book that you'd like to share with us?
Yes, I actually love. There's a lot of actions that for Messi. This one is one of my favorite ones here, where he's kicking the goal and just showcasing, him in action. I just love that.
That's great. Ellia, how about you? What's your favorite illustration from your book that you're sharing with us today? Your favorite illustration from your book?
Yep, this way. It actually has 4 characters in it. This was Lucy and Ethel. Wait, backwards. Lucy and Ethel and Fred and Desi. Ricky in the show. They had gotten some big fishes when they were in Florida. I think this was the one where they were supposed to be fishing. I forgot the episode, but yeah, it's rare. Back in the day, it was rare for me to have more than one person in my illustrations because I work so small. This is actually in real life 8 by 16 inches. So this way, for me to have 4 characters in and work as small as I did, I work and everything is, I'm trying to figure this out, cut, including even the lines on her dress, and all the lashes are all cut in paper. It takes some time, so it was fun to do. And it's actually has animals, which is, I mean, it's a fish, but I rarely have people and animals all in one shot, so I was expanding.
How do you decide what kind of paper that you want to use for your cut paper illustrations?
Well, over time, I've gotten to have to use like thicker paper because if it's too thin, you can start to see if it layers, and I'm really picky about that. I can use vintage paper, like wallpaper. I love collecting that stuff. But if it's patterned, it clashes too much. It's just a matter of finding the color to match with what the editors want. So that's kind of a lot of back and forth. But once I find the right color, if anything, we got to tweak it online. But I tend to just be like, this is the exact color, and I'll find it. And then we go from there. So if they want stripes, if they do stripes, I cut that. I won't draw it. It's very rare. I'll use like blush, and I'll use a little bit of drawing on my stuff, but for the most part, everything is cut. So if it's like really, really tiny, then I'll use thin paper because it's easier to like layer. But if it gets too thick, when you scan it in, it leaves too big of a shadow, and then that changes the color, which I know now I'm getting technical, but so I try to keep it at a certain thickness of paper.
That's great. That's so cool. I love that. So my favorite illustration from my story, and this is probably because, I mean, especially because it's, you know, Halloween's right around the corner, but I love skulls and kind of spooky stuff. So this was my favorite. So this is Pedro, and he is creating emoji ganga, which are Mexican big puppets that are in parades. And I actually do have the original here. So going back to how that might change, that question that we had about digital. And I find that, I don't know if everyone can relate to this, but I always find that when you're an illustrator, the colors are always, they're never the same. You know, so when they print, sometimes they do go a little bit darker. So you have to think about that when you're illustrating. It's just try to pump up the colors and make them as vibrant as you can. And even just, you know, doing that digitally even more so to emphasize the color, because then when they get printed, sometimes depending on the paper, and of course this is a whole new group of people that do this part of the project. Once we finish with the illustrations, now the publisher has a big role, and usually they're working on the book for like another year until we actually see it in book form. You know, you almost forget about it because you're working on other things, and then you get a box in the mail one day with your books, and it's a big celebration. Okay, so for we do have a prompt here, a drawing prompt for us. So Mia wants to know if we can draw a famous figure whose biography we would like to do. So that's a good one. So if we think about that for a second. And while we're doing that, my next question is going to be specifically about the book. So why do you think it's important for children to learn about this person's life? So are there any specific messages that you want children to know about your famous figure? So Ellia, would you like to start?
Well, Lucy and Desi were like the first interracial marriage on TV. they were like the first people to have like the interracial baby. Mentioned that on TV. It was comedy. It really put females in the forefront. As far as comedy, you know, it was like the first time you got to hear Spanish. He was Cuban, and you know, get to see me as a. I mean, I know I'm was born in the '80s, but you know, you got to hear and you got to see a little bit of yourself, a little bit of culture, even from back in the day. And they opened up the doors for so many other movies and artists, like, you know, like not artists, but like television people to be on TV to get their stories told. I think it was like Star Trek and the Dick Van Dyke Show. The Desi Lou Productions had so many other shows under them that made an impact and started being able to showcase more people of color. I think while there was no Black people on Lucy and Desi on the Lucy show, you start to see more and more in those productions. So I think it opened up a lot of doors and for people of color and starting to see us. I mean, when you think of Latinos in the industry way back then, you can start to think of Desi and start to think of like, you know, Cesar Romero. And that was like the first like Caribbean guy that I can think of that was on TV back then.
Yeah, that's great. Coming next, I'll give everybody some time to continue thinking about their next famous person they want to draw. So Pedro, I think it's important for children to learn about him because, well, number one, alebrijes have become this huge folk art custom, not only in Mexico, but now we see it coming internationally where more people know about it. So folks who are listening, if you've seen the Pixar movie Coco, and those spirit animals that are, you know, in the afterlife, those are alebrijes, and Pedro created those. And what was so interesting about this is that he was afraid of those mojigangas that his family had him paint and make for the parades because they were huge. You know, people were able to slip inside them as a puppet so that they can twirl around in the streets. And as a child, that can be kind of scary, you know, because sometimes they were devils, they were skeletons, they were sometimes famous icons or people, but for a kid that might be a little scary. So as he was working on these all day long in the workshop with his family, he sometimes would have nightmares about them and they would chase him in his dreams. So these alebrijes are something that he came up with as a way to conquer his nightmares and eat up those monsters. So that's where the Pedro and the Monster Eaters title comes from. So it was just really exciting just to know that he took this thing that he was scared of and conquered it through his art, you know, through creating, through making. There was a way for him to challenge his fears, and it became something that was amazing. And at first his family didn't approve because he wasn't working on the mojigangas and the piñatas he was supposed to be working on, but he continued making them on his own anyway. And then people started coming around and loving what he was working on and said, hey, can you make one for me? Can you make one for me? And it became this really popular thing that eventually became the family business, and it still is. So he has generations of his children and grandchildren that now have taken over that business. But, you know, when you go to Mexico, you can see these creatures all over. You know, I even have one on my necklace that I got from Mexico. They're so super fun. They're made out of paper mache that you can just get from around the house. So you make your own glue. So you can use Elmer's glue, mix it with a little bit of water. You're going to construct something out of cardboard. And then you take paper, could be tissue paper, it could be newspaper, and you just start pasting it around the cardboard, almost like what we call paper mache. And then eventually it will harden. So then you have this, you know, nice sculpture that you harden, and then you just paint it. So he painted in all different colors and patterns, and people all over Mexico collect them now. So I start to see some of those things coming more into America, into the States, because of, you know, movies like Coco, which is really great. Great. Edel, what about you? Is there any message that you think that is important that children should know about your person or your story?
Yeah, I think she's going to be the next president of the United States. So I'm practicing my Kamala.
Yeah.
I think there should be a book about her if she becomes president. So I would love to do that book. Editors out there. So I think having the first female president of the United States would be a very momentous thing. So I would love to do a book about her. So I'm just trying. Well, I like. Well, I mean, she's really she has a very nice way to deal with people, where she talks to, especially the way she talks to kids and teenagers. From what I've seen her, I think it's really very nice and impressive. And I think the fact that she grew up basically, her father was no longer around, so her mother raised her, and everything she's been able to do in her life. I think it would create a pretty cool autobiographical book. So, but I'd have to look at a lot of more reference, because right now I'm just making it up.
That's great. Nomar, what about you? Is there a specific message that you want children to know about either the character that you're drawing right now or the one that was in your book?
Well, I come from a family that's very musically inclined, so I would love to maybe do a little golden book on Tito Puente, just because I just love his music, and he was very inspirational, especially with my dad. My dad is a Latin percussionist as well too, and just to be able to bring another Puerto Rican to life in a book will be awesome to do. So that's one person, and also Roberto Clemente as well too. That would be an awesome little golden book. So just putting it out there.
Manifesting. Anything else want to share? Ellia, what are you drawing?
Miranda, beautiful woman, and her fashion was amazing. Her music was amazing, and I know people know about her, but I think her history and her personal biography is one that would be worth learning about, especially with her fashion and how much everyone has appropriated it. And it's been such an icon, even her hat, that people should always see what it's all about and see what her history is about. Her shoes and her dresses. I mean, I'm a huge fan of dresses, so I would love to be able to draw and do all that history of her life. I mean, it was pretty hefty. So, and I have all her records, like actual records. I'd love to do an ode to her.
I am drawing. I know, Ellia, you did a story about her, so I'm super jealous. I wish I could too, but I would love to do a book about Frida Kahlo. And I know there's a lot of books out there about her, but I just went to visit Casa Azul over the summer in Mexico, nice. And I was just so resonated by this beautiful home that she lived in most of her life, and even went back there as an adult. So what really resonates with me, since she does have a really traumatic life, is that I wanted to explore her childhood. Because she didn't know she wanted to be a painter. She thought she wanted to be a scientist or a doctor, and then she had this tragedy that made her bedridden, and then she discovered art that way through her father giving her paints. And I would really love editors to do a book about her childhood, spoken through, the house or something like that. So that's what I'm manifesting into the world. As we're working on these, to show off all the editors out there of the projects we want to work on next, how about we talk about our favorite snacks? What are your favorite snacks or drinks or things to do while you're working in late nights in your studio? Nomar, how about you start?
Oh, snacks. Definitely gummy bears. I love gummy bears. But as far as I'll snack on anything. It's just I wish I had empanadillas and a malta. That would be the best.
Oh. Can you get maltas by you?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, I'll send you some. We got some by us easily.
Oh.
Ellie, what's your favorite snack?
Well, I am a coffee girl, even though it affects me a little bit, but coffee and water. Oh, look, he's drawing it right there. Coffee all the way. That is my snack. That's my snack
too.
Yeah, see? See? Just
So
coffee.
that's what makes Illustrators. 5 of these
Yep.
a day.
Right.
Great. Yes, I am definitely a caffeine nut myself, so I do coffee in the morning, and then studios. I studio sessions. I love tea, so I'm a big tea drinker. So I always have like a nice hot cup of tea when I'm working. It gets me in, all set, and then a crunchy snack too sometimes on the side. So I have kids, so sometimes I go raid the pantry for some Cheez-Its, but that's usually what we do. Great. Okay, so as we're working, so we're about to wrap it up. Is there anything else that you would like to tell readers, such as social media accounts, where to follow you, any projects you're working on next? Nomar, how about you say?
So yes, you can follow me at Nomar's Illustration and Instagram, and nomarperez.com, my website. I'm currently working on 2 books, which is Moon Chef, is a board book by Delia Ruiz.
All right.
Coming out in summer 2026. And I just finished one called Batter Up for the First Day of School, which is a book about getting ready for school, based on baseball, all kinds of baseball themes. And that's by Bethany Hedgenis. And that should be out in May 13 of 2025. And I'm also working on other projects as well too, my own stories. So just keep looking at my Instagram for more information. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Edel, how about you? What's your social media handles, and are there any projects you're allowed to share with us that you're working on right now?
Yeah, my Instagram is Edel Rodriguez Studio, and my website is edelrodriguez.com. And I have a documentary basically about my life and my work that's coming out on PBS probably in the spring. It's at a few film festivals this fall. And then I also have another book that's coming out, I think, in the spring. It's called Two Worlds, and it's a word book, so it's a bilingual word book, showing on one side sort of what a word is in Spanish, and on the other side what it is in English, and how words mean different things depending on where you are. Like a fruit in the Caribbean is one thing, and a fruit in up here in New Jersey is bland. So that kind of thing, and what happened when I arrived in the United States when I was 9 years old, and like confronting by these two things that were vastly different. So that's about a 40-page kids picture book, which is kind of fun. Yeah, and beyond that, just a lot of art shows and all sorts of things going on.
Great, thank you. Ellia, what about you?
I have a solo gallery show coming up in December. It's a local gallery show showcasing all my and I dropped my earbud. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All my cut paper illustrations from every one of the children's books, and then I'll have a bunch of other Latino inspired artwork. As far as books, I'm on hold with that for now, but I'll be doing a lot of writing and in the meantime, so taking a little break. I did like the 5 books within like the past couple of years.
Great. And where can we find you? Social media?
So Green Bean Baby on Instagram is my main thing right now.
Wonderful. Okay, so my social media account is crod, CRO10. That's my Instagram. And my website is crod, CROD, illustration.com. And for educators out there, librarians, teachers, go to the school tab on the top. There's actually a teaching guide for my book so that you can bring it into the curriculum for your school. So some of the projects that I'm working on, I actually recently acquired a literary agent. So my next goal is to be author and illustrator of my own work. And I have a couple works out there on submission right now. So I can't really talk about them yet, but they are all Hispanic related, different cultures and things like that. So I'm just really excited to just start working on my own stories, and I cannot wait.
Awesome.
Great. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming and sharing your work with us today, for drawing. And thank you, listeners, for giving us wonderful questions and prompts to draw. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.